can see you've all got very different relationships with money there. There's one thing that stands out from what you've said, and it's something I was going to mention anyway. I mean, we're talking about ditching the debt, but what's actually really important is how do you not get into debt in the first place? And a major factor is, why are we not taught how to manage money at school? So when you do your maths lessons at school and you're learning about trigonometry and balancing all these equations, why is nobody teaching you about compound interest in any real detail? Why are you not learning how to manage the financial things that will be with you for the rest of your life? It has now been acknowledged that this is a big cause of the financial problems people experience later in life. So certainly in Wales, the curriculum is being changed and they're adding in financial education as a separate subject. And fingers crossed, that does mean in the future, our children at least will potentially sidestep some of the problems we've encountered. But I think it's quite obvious that once you reach sort of your mid 40s and 50s, you look back and go, why didn't I start that pension earlier? Why didn't I invest earlier? Why did I spend all that money on things I didn't really need? And if we could just have identified that when we were teenagers, we'd probably have been in a much better position now than we all are, really. So things like, how many kids leave school and don't know the difference between a debit card and a credit card? How many can read their payslip and understand what the NI contributions are, what the tax that's being taken, what that's for? There's no real world skills being given. And I think that really is a massive problem that our generation have had, that I'm hoping moving forwards, future generations may sidestep if this new curriculum gets put into place. So when we think about debt, there's an awful lot of information out there. If you Google ditch the debt, there's some really common things you'll come across. Everybody will tell you, look for the 0% credit cards and transfer your credit cards, pay off your most expensive debts first. There's an awful lot out there that is just very, very obvious. And really, it's more important to not get there in the first place. And not all debt is bad. There is such a thing as good debt. Mortgages, we don't really consider our mortgages to be a negative thing. The difference is that we're borrowing money there to buy something that's got long-term value for us. It's not like expensive credit cards you're using because you fancied something you saw in a shop one day. So we have to think as well about, with debt, not all debt is bad. And that's true in your businesses as well. Very often, if you're getting into debt in your business, but it's to expand your business, it's for long-term growth. That's not a bad thing. You've got to prioritize when you're thinking about debt. Why are you taking it out? What is it going to achieve? If in the long term, it's going to make you or your business more secure and a better position, not a bad thing. So don't label all debt as bad and think it's a terrible thing if you have to borrow money. Sometimes it's okay. It's actually going to get you where you want to go. So it's very easy when you are in debt to bury your head in the sand and not want to address the problem. One of the big reasons people don't sleep at night is because they're worrying about money. And one of the big issues in relationships is where couples argue about money. So I think part of it is being British and we don't really talk about money, or certainly our parents' generation didn't talk about money. So it's quite a big change to think, right, let's be open, let's address this, let's really face up to what's going on. I've got a client who every Sunday at 11 a.m. sits with a cup of coffee with his wife, and this is set in stone, it's every Sunday. And for half an hour, they go through what have they spent in the week, what's coming up in the next week, what are the plans, what savings they've got in place, and they know exactly what's going on. And he said, without that, their marriage wouldn't cope. They both need to know what's going on. Everything is open between them. I think, what a good idea. I don't know anybody else who does that. It's a really great idea in theory. Can't say I've put it into practice, but yeah, so try not to bury your head in the sand. Do face up to these things because the problems don't go away by themselves. Think about where you are now. Think about where you want to be. You're not going to get there without some sort of planning and being open to what's going on with you, really. So if we're thinking about how you stop yourself from getting into debt, I'm not clever enough to do one of these Zoom polls. So pop your answers in the chat. How many months expenditure do you think you need to keep in cash to cover any sort of emergencies? What sort of emergency fund do you think you should keep? Karen's going with 3 months. Cheryl, 6. Actually, Karen and Cheryl, it's somewhere between the two of you. The general rule of thumb is in cash, you want to have enough to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses. That's just all your bills. And it can sound like a really big thing. I can see Miriam's face there thinking, how on earth do I build that up? Little by little. Anything you can do is better than nothing. Anything you can put away. And then where should you keep it? Well, if you think about it at the moment, the interest rates on cash are atrocious. So whereas I used to say to people, oh, it's fine, just keep it in your cash account, I've actually changed what I tell people now. Think about premium bonds. They're completely safe. You can get at them easily if you need to, but it's not sitting in your bank account where you can spend it by accident. And if you get the odd £25 win, that's actually better than you're going to get in the bank at the moment at 0.01%. So think about that as well. Okay, so if you're supposed to have 3 to 6 months in savings, how many days savings does the average UK person have if they were to lose their job? So how many days could they cover their outgoings for? Cheryl, 2 weeks.
I'd say about a month, if that.
You're about right, Karen. It's actually 32 days, but in Wales, it's actually 26. I don't know why we don't save as well as the rest of Britain, but we're actually in an even worse position. So yeah, we just don't have it. The average family just don't have enough there. And if you haven't got the cash there to cover those unforeseen expenses, like if the car breaks down, if you need to replace the fridge, that's when you resort to the expensive loans, the credit cards, and that's really what starts to get you into trouble. So you want to avoid getting to that position if you can. Once you've got into that position and you're paying the interest as well, obviously, that's where you go into that downward spiral. So really the key thing is try not to get to that point. It's hard when you're starting with nothing. If everything you've got coming in is already going out, how do you build up that emergency fund? Anything you can put away, even if it's only £10 a month, just put it somewhere and let it build up, and gradually you'll get there. It's just something to really try and focus on building up. So thinking about other things you can do in addition to your emergency fund. The one thing I see as being the absolute foundation of financial planning is protection insurances, so that you can actually save your family if the worst should happen, really protect your family. So I see a financial pyramid, and at the bottom is protection. That is your foundation. So how many people in the UK do you think have pet insurance?
I think it doesn't somebody say that there's more people with pet insurance than household insurance or job insurance, something ridiculous like that.
Exactly. So in the UK, 3.8 million people have taken out a policy to cover the costs if their pet gets sick. But when it comes to protecting their income, in the whole of the UK, only 300,000 people have an income protection policy. So income protection is this great thing where if you can't work because you get sick, it will pay you an income until you're well enough to go back to work, or until you reach pension age if you're never well enough to go back to work, or if you pass away reasonably quickly. So it's just that extra insurance that means you can actually cover your bills if you're off work sick. But more people have protected themselves for if their dog gets poorly than they have for if they lose their jobs. And income protection, I've seen it in action. During the pandemic, I rang all my business owner clients to see how things were going with them. And the one gentleman picked up the phone and said, I'll be honest with you, Beth, I'm not even thinking about business at the moment. He said, I've been diagnosed with testicular cancer. So I asked him some questions on how things were going. I said, have you made a claim on your income protection policy? And he looked at me and he thought, I've forgotten about that. So I found him the claim number and I found him the policy number. He rang them up. 2 days later, he rang me, all sorted. They were going to pay him £1,000 a month until he was well enough to go back to work. So he didn't have to worry about covering the bills and he could focus on getting better. And that plan hadn't cost him that much to take out, but my goodness, did it give him peace of mind so he could focus on getting well. So it's just a lot of people don't even think about this, but it is one of those things to consider. When you think about how we spend our money, how much per week does the average family spend on treats and entertainment?
20% of their income?
It's at least 27 to £35, depending which bit of Britain you're in. But how much do you think the average family spends on life assurances and illness cover? £5 a week. So if we can find £27 a week to spend on going to the cinema and out for meals, you would like to think we could maybe find a little bit to put to protecting our families. It's only when you start comparing the numbers, you start to think, oh, hang on, priorities here. And these things really can make a difference. They really can save you from getting into trouble. So when you're thinking about insurances, there's lots of different types, both personal and for your business. So personal, the one you'll all have come across is when you take out a mortgage, you're encouraged to take out term assurance. So if you pass away before you pay off the mortgage gets paid off. Pretty much everybody's had that at some point. It doesn't seem to be as essential now. It used to be mortgage providers insisted on it. They don't actually ask for proof of it anymore. So fewer people are having it than used to. But it is a really little bit of peace of mind that if something happens to you, at least the mortgage gets paid off. Then there's also critical illness, which means if you get diagnosed with something serious like cancer, if you have a stroke, you have a heart attack, it will pay out a lump sum. And at the time you take out the policy, you choose the lump sum. Very often, you take it out to match your mortgage. The same reason, you could pay off the mortgage at least if you got diagnosed as being ill. And then we already talked about income protection, which will do that regular payment if you're off work ill. But then for your business, if you're a limited company in particular, there are all sorts of ways you can protect your business. There are insurances you can take out that the business covers, and then it's a business expense, so it reduces your corporation tax bill, but you get the benefits. There are different types you can take out so that if you're a partnership, if something happens to one of you, the other one gets a payout. Insurance is to ensure your business can continue without you. Or if you've got a really important employee who's got some specific skill that is really important, especially in something technical, in engineering trades, software trades. If something were to happen to that person and they're the brain behind what you really do, that can cause the business lots of problems. There's insurances you take out that will cover training a replacement, hiring a replacement, keep the business afloat while you were trying to replace that person. So for business purposes, there's an awful lot of things you can do, but it's particularly good if you're a limited company. If you want to spend a couple of minutes reviewing your protection at any point, just give me a shout. I can actually send you a really useful protection health check. And you answer some questions, just makes you think for a minute. And then I can have a look through it and point you in the right direction. If there's any areas where you look and go, oh my goodness, there's a massive gap in my plan in here. Something really quick we can do just to sort of address that for you. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about the protection side of things? This really is like the foundation of financial planning.
I got caught out years ago where I did have all the stuff, all the insurances they recommended, but when I actually needed them, they denied the claim. And that's just made me very weary of any insurances now. So
I only use companies from a specific panel where we know they've got a claim payment rate of at least 98%. Because there are cowboys out there. It's true, there absolutely are. So I'm lucky in that I've got a big organization sitting behind me who do all the research. We've got about 17 providers who are the only ones we're interested in working with because we know they pay out. But it is an issue. It does put people off.
Yeah.
And also the idea that you're paying for something that may never pay out. But you do the same with your house insurance and you hope you're never going to have to claim on it. And you do the same with your car insurance. So it's sort of, that's my view on it really, is that you don't want
You're kind of legally required to have car insurance.
Yes. And it used to be you had to have life insurance to take out a mortgage because the mortgage providers wanted to know they were definitely going to get their money. So I'm surprised that slid the way it has, really.
That might have been to do with the what was it, the scandal around the mortgages where people were buying the mortgages but not paying them off, and the endowments. Yeah. The other thing that's changed recently is insurers are no longer allowed to charge differently for men and women, and that actually worked in our favour. So us living longer didn't actually work against us anymore. They have to treat us entirely the same. So when you get quotes for insurance, it's based solely on your date of birth and your postcode, because where you live actually affects the statistics for how long you're going to live and your chances of getting different illnesses. It's amazing the difference your postcode can make actually when you're getting quotes.
But that's just for general quotes. When you then start applying for insurances, you go through underwriting, you get assessed properly based on your personal circumstances. Okay, so protection is obviously a big thing. But then thinking about what comes next on that financial planning pyramid, once you've got your bedrock in place and you've got that security beneath you, the next thing to think about is just meeting your needs. How do you pay for all your bills? But within that, I also think that includes paying towards your pension, making sure that you're protected, not just now, but in the future. I think saving for your pension is part of your commitment to being secure. It's an essential outgoing, not something you should just be paying into as and when you feel you can afford it. Because realistically, how long is the state pension going to be there for? We don't really know. I'm 24 years from my state pension age, and I'm not assuming it's going to be there when I'm planning ahead. I just sort of think, yeah, it'd be nice if it's there, but I'm not going to count on it.
Yeah, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, so it's just absolutely crazy to even rely on it these days.
Exactly. So I don't take it into my plan, really. So thinking about pensions, now we don't have a job for life. There was a time where you went to work for a company, you worked there all your life, and when you finished, they gave you a pension. Very few people have that situation anymore. We do now have a big improvement on where we were 10, 15 years ago, in that more employers are legally obliged to provide a pension. But still, if you're not in the same job for life, you could get to, well, certainly by the time you're my age, most people have got 3 or 4 pensions because they've had 3 or 4 jobs. And what happens is people lose track of these. So how many lost pensions do you think there are in the UK? Pensions from workplaces that people have had that they've forgotten about and they've just lost the paperwork. It's actually a terrifying number. There are 1.6 million lost pensions in the UK, and they're worth over 19 billion.
So what happens to them?
What happens to them is that at some point or other, the government will just take it all back. After a few years, they won't go out of their way to try and find the owners. The companies aren't obliged to find you. You're obliged to find them. A lot of people just have forgotten about them. And what normally happens is people have moved house. And so their address has changed and companies have sent out paperwork that's not been received, and people have just lost track over the years. We are very bad at record keeping in this country. Absolutely terrible at record keeping. Steffi, I don't know whether or not it's different in Germany. Are you much better at your record keeping over there? You've got the reputation, haven't you, Germans, as being organised?
I think most people are. I never have been, to be honest. I know I've got a pension from my previous job somewhere with Zurich, I believe. And it's just buried in my attic somewhere. I've never really looked at it, and I know I have to go back to what I need to do with it. So I actually need to check with you, Beth, because I know that I've got it, but I don't know what to do with it.
Well, if you've ever think back and think, oh, I know I worked at this place in these years, did I have a pension? HMRC actually have a website where you can track down missing pensions. So if you're not sure, you can put in the years you worked there and the company, and they will be able to give you an idea of whether or not you are likely to have a pension and who it's with and the contact details for that company. So if you're thinking back, think, oh, 15 years ago, wasn't very long, but for 2 years I worked at such and such a place. Chances are you can track it down still. They are working on a pensions dashboard. This was the big project for HMRC, and then the pandemic hit and it all stopped. It should have been live by now. The idea was you'd be able to just put in your national insurance number, because that stays the same throughout your life, and voila, there's a list of all your pensions. It'll be great when it happens, but we're a long way still from that. But in the meantime, they can be tracked down, so don't despair. There is a way of doing it. The other thing is, if you've got all these different pots of money, you might have some small ones and some big ones, and they become quite hard to manage. So you can normally consolidate them into one pot to make it that bit more manageable, as long as they're not final salaries. So unless you work for the NHS, or if you're a teacher, they can't be moved. Local government normally can't, but most other things you can track down and get back under control and make it all a bit more manageable. But does anybody know how much the state pension is every week?
Around 70 quid?
£179.60, so it's just over 9,000 a year. So if you're a couple, that's sort of 18,500. Realistically, would you be able to live on that? Most people probably might pay the basics, but you wouldn't have a very nice retirement. So that's one of the reasons people need to think about doing something themselves beyond just trusting the state. So to get a full state pension, do you know how many years you have to have been paying national insurance for? 35 years.
Oh.
And a lot of women, of course, have time off to bring up children. So they might not have 35 years. But if you were claiming child benefit in your name and not your partner's, those years will count towards your record. So even if you were at home for a few years, if the child benefit was in your name, that will count. There is a page on HMRC website. You can put in your national insurance number and it will track down how much state pension you're going to get based on the trajectory you're on, assuming you keep paying at the rate you are, and when you're going to get it. It does keep changing. I think 6 months ago, my state pension age was 67. And I was really pleased because I was 3 days younger than I needed to be for it to be 68. And then they moved it to 68. It won't be 68 by the time I get there. It might be 104 by the time I get there. But if you want to check, you can either go on the HMRC website and just put in, check my state pension age and do it all online. Or there's a form you can fill in if you prefer the old-fashioned way. But the website works really, really well and it's instant to get the results. Do you have any idea what the general rule is for how much you should have in your pension pot at the point you retire? It sort of makes sense when you think about it. They say 20 times whatever you want your income to be, thinking that you'll probably live for 20 more years. In reality, it's far more complicated than that. And it's not just about pensions these days. I don't talk about pension planning, I talk about retirement planning. Because realistically, you're going to have other assets as well as your pension. You may well have a large home that you're going to downsize and release funds you can live off. A lot of people have rental properties that will keep giving them an income even after they've retired, or that they can sell and release funds that way. There's a lot of other ways you could have savings or investments. So it's not just about the pensions, it's broader than that. And how much you're going to need is very different from person to person. So if you want to spend your retirement on the allotment and looking after the grandkids, you're not going to need as much as your neighbour who wants to spend 6 months a year on a 5-star cruise. It very much comes down to your personal plans. And very often when you're 25, 30, you have no idea what you're going to want to do when you're 65, 70. You can't possibly imagine. And that's one of the reasons people put it off. They think, well, I won't start pension yet because plenty of time. You can't start early enough. If you've got kids who are in their early 20s, please encourage them to start, because even a little bit done then will make a massive difference later on. The difference between starting at 22 versus 32 is incredible when you've got that extra gap of the compound. Honestly, it really does make a difference. The way I think about it with a retirement plan is a bit like when you're booking a holiday. So you need to think about, where do you want to go? What's your budget? What's your time scale? You can't book a holiday without sort of having some parameters for what you're doing. So I tend to work with clients and we'll do some what if scenarios. So if you retire at 62 and you want £22,000 a year, this is what you need to be doing now. And if somebody says, oh, that's too much, I can't save that. Okay, so if you retire at 64 and you have 19,000, and we'll play around with some numbers. So it's one of those things, just keep thinking about it. Your plans are going to change as you get older and get closer to that point. Your circumstances are going to change. You may well come into an inheritance and go, well, hey, problem solved. You can't count on that, but these are the things that you can factor in. So it's definitely a much broader thing than just thinking about your pensions. But I really can't say clearly enough, please encourage your kids as soon as they reach grown-up age and they've got any sort of income. Even a stakeholder pension, when you put £20 a month in, is better than not doing anything. It can make a big difference. So I did say that we're spectacularly bad at record keeping in the UK. You would not believe the scale of this. So there's something called the Unclaimed Assets Register. What this is where people have passed away, their family members did not know they had certain savings or investment plans. And so it's never been claimed. So how much money or money's worth of assets do you think is on the Unclaimed Assets Register in the UK? £200 billion worth of assets. So this is where people have bought shares, they've invested in ISAs, they've invested in bonds, they've bought all sorts of products, and nobody knew about it. So when they passed away, their families didn't know to go to those providers and say, I've inherited this person's estate, that's now mine. So the state will take it eventually. which presumably is not what the person who invested wanted to have happen to that money. So the other thing I really encourage you to do is record keeping. Doesn't have to be anything sophisticated, especially these days. A spreadsheet would do it. I've actually got a really good tool I can send out to anybody who wants it, where you can document everything you've got, who it's with, the contact details. And what I find is when a couple sits down and starts to work through this together, or a family, or with their parents, whoever it is that needs to know, and they start documenting everything they've got, they'll find they've got duplicate policies in place that are doing the same job, and they can cancel one, save some money. Or the husband might suddenly say to the wife, I didn't know you had that. Or the wife might say to the husband, I didn't know you had that. And actually, they're in a much better position than either one had realized, because they hadn't had that conversation and shared the information. So filling that in is actually a really useful exercise. Most families find that doing that opens their eyes to lots of different things. And then if anything happens to one of you, somebody else can pick up that document and know exactly what you've got, take over running your finances for you if they need to. So if anybody wants one, just give me a shout and I'll send you a copy. It's an electronic tool and it's really useful. Now, I've been doing some research using my Wealth Personality app to find out what things matter to people. So the last 2 months of last year, I had a lot of women fill this out, and there were 8 different areas where people could say the bits of finance they were interested in. There was one of the 8 options that was never, ever chosen. In 150 women I asked, the one thing nobody ever mentioned was taxes. And the one thing in my job that surprised me when I started is my clients benefit as much from the help I give them in managing their tax position as from finding the right investments and the growth in their investments. And people don't realize they actually can control to some extent the taxes they're paying. There are decisions you can make, ways you can structure things, especially as a business owner, that work very much in your favor. But people tend to think that tax is something you've got to pay, it is what it is, and they don't realize they can actually make some decisions that influence that. Especially if you're a limited company, you can really have some say in how you're taking your profits, how that's all taxed. So the other thing I urge everybody to do is actually stop and think a minute whether or not that's something that you could do with some advice on. So your accountants can help you if you've got accountants. I'm more than happy to give you a quick call and talk you through different options. But honestly, I think you can probably improve your finances more by getting your tax position right than by saving or investing or doing anything else. It can make a massive difference, especially if you're a couple, because there are things you can do between you, allowances you can pass between you. There's some clever things you can do, but you wouldn't necessarily figure them out without the help of an accountant or an advisor. And then the last thing I just thought people are really interested in at the moment is ethical investing. So anybody who has a pension is an investor, whether you realize it or not. And the money that's in your pension is being put into certain companies. And some of those companies will be very profitable, but not necessarily very ethical. Others will be really, really clever in how they're working. They will be very responsible in the way they treat the environment and the way they treat their workers. And to some people, this is the key thing to them, is that they're supporting companies that they know are treating the environment well, are treating their workers well. And I have to say the people that are most interested in ethical investing is women. It's not the men. I've got a couple where the woman is really, really careful. She's got a bespoke portfolio. There's no petrol, there's no armaments, there's no tobacco. The husband quite clearly said to me, he'd invest in killer robots if he thought that would make him money. Now, I've never actually seen a fund yet that offers killer robots, but there is a big difference in attitude between men and women when it comes to the environment. And women are the ones who are really, really pushing the green revolution in that area. So if anybody ever wants to have a quick look over what they've got, look at what funds your pensions or your savings or investments are in. It's quite easy to find out how green they are. The companies are being pushed to really publicize this data now, but it's just another thing to think about when you're thinking about your overall position on things. So that's sort of my little list of the key things that people are talking about at the moment. So has anybody got anything they want to ask me about any area?
So this is a golden moment. So do feel free to ask any question you like, because Beth is a minefield of amazing information. So Miriam, over to you. You had got a question?
I do. I mean, there's part of me that thinks, wow, this is really interesting and really valuable. But at the same time, I feel really bloody depressed. we lived so hand to mouth, me and my husband, with the kids and everything. And I think how, like, even when I put £10 aside, pop it away, and then all of a sudden something happens and I have to use that money, and I just cannot see us ever retiring.
I think young families now, it's harder than ever. I think there are more pressures on our finances than they've ever been. And I think until you get to the point where your kids are a little bit older, a lot of families find they can't do anything about planning for the future until their kids are teenagers. And even then, realistically, you've got to put them through university or buy them a car or help them with a house deposit. So I think it's much harder now than it was for our parents' generation, without a doubt.
It's impossible. It's terrifying. I would rather my child got an apprenticeship than went to university and, racked up a whole load of debt.
Well, there's actually a school of thought that even says you shouldn't pay to put the kids through university because the way that the loans are paid back works out better.
Yes. Well, but also in Wales, you don't have to pay for their fees, which is brilliant, but then you've got to pay for them living and everything else that goes with it. I just think it is such for me, with a young family, it's incredibly depressing. And we're a family that don't go on holiday. We go camping that costs, £115 a week. And that's a struggle. If
it makes you feel any better, you are not alone. That is very much a normal way to feel for young families at the moment. It's the majority of the people I work with are young families, and I hear it all the time. And there is no magic bullet that puts it all right. It is just a case of wait it out, because it does get better. But then, of course, the problem is, I wish I didn't know any of this. If in my 20s, when I didn't have a family and commitments, I'd been putting the money away then, instead of spending it going out and having a nice car, I wouldn't have had that trouble in my 30s when I had a young family. Because I didn't know that at the time. Looking back now, it's easy to say. I would have had the money to carry me through that difficult time. There's nothing you can do about it now, because that window of opportunity is gone. But no, it is difficult, but it does get that bit easier once the kids are out of the house. You do sort of find yourself playing catch up. But you can get this still.
And who else has got a question? So, Kathy, I know you've been playing around with Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. Can you share with us what the heck have you been doing with Bitcoin? You're on mute, Kathy. You're still on mute.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's been out of a learning curve, but I've discovered that you can very quickly get your head around reading the charts and doing a bit of spot investing there. I think it's worth everyone's while having a look at Bitcoin. You can download a very simple, easy to use app called a wallet. Coinbase, for example, is the best one I think at the moment. It's the easiest one to use, and there's some very simple tools on there. You can look at various cryptocurrencies, see what they're doing, and invest very, very easily, and keep your money safe in there.
So how did you start with this Bitcoin? How much did you put in? And in reality, what have you made?
Well, it started back 2017 when my son, it always takes the kids to do this stuff, said, Mum, you've got to get into Bitcoin. It's amazing. So I put £1,000 in, and then we had a massive Bitcoin crash. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Everything that they said in the papers about it being a scam or whatever, And so anyway, so I forgot all about it. It went down to like 10 pence or whatever. And I thought, oh, yeah. But back in those days, 2017, you didn't, the wallets were just starting out. And in order to he was talking about something called Ripple, which I won't get into now, but in order to buy it, because it was escalating massively at that time, you had to buy some Bitcoin and you had to convert it into Ethereum, and then you had to convert it, and it took so long to do it that it was proving very difficult for someone who's not at all technically minded for me. And in the meantime, we had the crash. So I thought, forget it, it's all too complicated and it's a scam. And then last year, I got a new phone and everything, and I was looking at all my old apps that I hadn't opened up for a while. I was, Coinbase. I wonder what's happened to my 10 pence that was in there. And I opened it up, and it was still stuck in Ethereum. The money hadn't traveled through to Ripple, and it was now £2,500. I was like, whoa, that's nice. And so then I looked at it and started playing around with it. And within a few weeks, I got up to £25,000, which was wonderful. And it was a great summer. And then we had another few crashes. So it's very good. You have to invest a bit of time studying it. That's what I say. But it's not beyond anyone. It's crazy to do if you're absolutely apply yourself. And there were some days where you could make 10,000 in a day. Yeah. So it's fun. It's a bit like the Wild West. If anyone wants to have a chat with me about it, yeah, I'd love to talk about my favorite subject with you.
But have you made real money? Have you been able to take money out and spend it? Yeah,
I have, and it's got me through very difficult times with other businesses crashing around me. Crypto's really been my savior. But at the moment, with the war going on, and so since Omicron hit us at Christmas time, and then now we've got the war, it's very, very, very choppy. So I'm just looking at I've left it alone for a little while, because what you're looking for is like normal patterns that you get into the rhythm of certain patterns with certain cryptos and currencies and stuff. But when the world is suddenly turned upside down, like a looming third world war, everything changes very, very rapidly. So like with everything, you only put in what you're willing to lose. But you know, if you take your time and anyway, I'm happy to have a chat with any of the girls about it. To have a coffee, it's fun, and you can earn an amazing amount. Yeah. So,
right, lovely. So Beth the Pound, what have you got to say about cryptocurrency trading?
It is something young people are obsessed with at the moment. Everybody under the age of 30 says to me, what should I do with crypto? And as Kathy says, have a dabble, just only dabble what you can afford to lose. So I spoke to somebody yesterday who'd put in £80 and it went up to 3,300. He was really, really pleased, but he didn't encash it then because he thought it would go higher. And the next week it was worth £4.50. But, you know, he wasn't losing money he couldn't afford to lose, so it didn't matter. What I say to the young people is, do not think you're going to put your whole house deposit savings into crypto. If you want to put a little bit in and have a little play, that's fine, but don't put everything in. Only put in what you can afford to lose, because as Kathy says, it is really volatile.
Thank you for that, Beth. Any more questions? So, Steffi, what is it that you're currently juggling with, sort of finance-wise at the moment?
Everything.
Okay.
Everything. I was very unfortunate in my previous marriage, and where my ex-husband spent all my life savings on his drinking. So my life savings went, and I didn't have a house. I've always rented. I've been renting here since the millennium. Never been able to own a house or anything. So putting money away is very difficult for us. Like I carefully saved up the last few weeks, few months, and then Ian's van broke last week and he needs it for work. He's a carpenter. He didn't have the money, so I had to buy the van. $2,500 gone again. So it always seems like you start building up and then something happens and you got to spend it again. So we've never been fortunate enough to have plenty of money behind us, to be honest. We just work to live, really.
Right. So Beth the Pound, what could you say in reply to that?
At least you did have the money there and you didn't have to get a credit card. Think of it that way. And the point of the emergency savings is they're there for you to draw on when you need them. They don't need to be there long term. They just need to be there to stop you having to borrow money. And if you've managed to do that at least, then you've done well.
True.
The thing about money is you don't necessarily want to be rich. You want to be able to afford to live a comfortable life and do the things you want to do. All money is a tool for you to be able to live the way you want to live. It's not something to have for the sake of it. It's something you need to have just so that you can be happy, not because you're rich, but because you're peace of mind. You can pay for everything you need to pay for. If your kids want to go on a school trip, you can say, yes, absolutely, you can go on the school trip. But it's not that you just need to amass lots and lots of it sitting in accounts and investments somewhere. You just want to be able to enjoy your life. And if you think about money that way, it's not something to have, it's something to get the lifestyle you want. And I don't mean living in a mansion and going on 5-star holidays 6 times a year. Be realistic about what you need to be happy, because Beth has said it herself, she was less happy when she was in a marriage with money than she is now. So money doesn't make you happy. It just enables you to get the things you need to make yourself happy. So it's not an end in itself.
I'm going to come to Yvonne, because I know Yvonne has been planning for retirement, and as part of that retirement, has set up a business. So Yvonne, what's your perspective on money and planning for retirement, or in planning to go self-employed as part of retirement?
One thing I've always done with my pension, I've had an additional amount that I've put in. So I've got an AVC, those additional voluntary contributions. So I've always topped up my pension with one of those, because the beauty is you get that back as a nice lump sum. So that lump sum I'm going to get now when I retire will cover all my business setup costs.
And that's an interesting one.
So I've always used that to top up, because I think it goes out at source, so you don't miss it then, because it goes straight out to my wage. So you just live on what you earn, don't you? So if I had that extra £100, I would just spend it. So because it goes out, it's not there, I don't spend it, I don't miss it.
And this is part of a private pension, is it, Yvonne?
Yes, yeah, it's a set, but I do it through my workplace. So it goes straight out to my salary.
That's interesting. So Beth,
I do it I've always done it wherever I've worked. I've done an additional voluntary.
That's interesting. So Beth, the pound, what have you got to say about that?
Yvonne's done exactly the right thing, because the good thing about pensions is the tax relief you get on them, and people don't appreciate how beneficial that is. So it depends on whether you're in a final salary scheme, which not many people these days are. Yvonne's been fortunate, she's had them in the past, but not many companies offer final salary now. Realistically, you're looking at defined contribution schemes. So for every £80 you put into the scheme, if you're a basic rate taxpayer, HMRC makes that up to £100. So you've made £20 straight away. And then that whole £100 is invested in your name. So you're getting 20% tax relief on the way in. And then when you get to retirement, you can take 25% of that pot of money tax-free from age, realistically, it's going to be 57, 58 for most of us now. You can then take 25% of that pot tax-free and do anything you want with it. So you can use it to set up a business. You can use it to do work on the house. You can use it to go on an amazing holiday. You can use it to pay for a kid's wedding or a deposit for a kid. It's yours. You do whatever you want with it, and it's completely tax-free. And then with the rest of that money, you've got options of different ways you can use them, depending on what else you've got in place. And that's where advisors like me will come in and help you work out the best way to do it. But if you've been building that up over the years, and as Yvonne says, she hasn't missed it, it's come out of her salary, and that's been building up year on year on year on year. So by the time you get to the point you can take it, it can be a sizable sum of money.
So well done, Yvonne. 10 out of 10. Amazing. So Karen, I know you've been doing a lot of money juggling, and you've got quite an interesting portfolio, how you manage yours. So what tips can you be sharing with us?
Well, I think I've done everything that you could possibly do wrong when it comes to money, and learnt the hard way. So we were in the 80s where interest rates were 15%, and we can still remember that for mortgage interest rates. So at the moment, we kind of a bit anxious the way things are going. So we've been paying our mortgage and hammering it the last 3 years. So I think if we carry on the way we're doing, we've probably got about 2 years left of the mortgage, in which case that's going to be our safety net, because that's the one thing that everybody needs is a roof over their house. You know, it's back Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, that's feeling of security. So that's one thing we've been doing. But we had two houses originally. We had, this house was a holiday home, and then we had a house in Swindon. And when the crash happened, we ended up selling the house in Swindon. And rather than put the capital and offset it against the mortgage that we've got here, what we did was invested it into rental property. So that's been giving us an income for the last 10 years. But it's also helped us pay off the mortgage as well. So it's been a win-win for us for that respect. So for me, having those sort of properties has been so beneficial, and being able to invest in low-cost properties. So one of the properties we bought was 35,000 up in Middlesbrough. They haven't increased an awful lot in terms of capital, but we do have regular income from it, which has been so helpful. But we've been sort of caught out with insurances in the past and all sorts of things, but we've kind of got rid of all our debt completely. So we don't do credit cards at all now. We just do debit cards. And if we can't afford it, we can't afford it. We just save up for everything now. And that's just how it works for us, you know.
Well
we just
done.
Don't do debt.
Well done. That's a nice one. Don't do debt. Love that. So coming back to you, Beth the Pound, I'm just wanting to do a roundup from everyone, because I'd be really interested to know what everyone's got from this evening, or if they've got a last tip they'd like to share. So thank you, Beth the Pound. You've been absolutely amazing. Can we put our hands together for Beth? Wow. Thank you, Beth, for sharing your learning. So let's do a bit of a round robin now to work out who's got what out of the tips this evening. So let's start with you, Miriam. I'm so glad you haven't topped yourself there, that you're still there. Perhaps, have you taken to the booze? Is that alcohol you're drinking?
No, it's not, but it will be when I go downstairs. It's a lot of things that I already know, kind of, I should be putting money aside, but at the moment, what's reassuring, I think, is Beth saying it will get easier when the kids leave. Although my dad is 78 or 79, and I don't know if he'd agree with you, with me and my brother still kind of floundering around. But I don't know. I mean, the encouraging thing is that we don't have credit cards. We have debt as in mortgage, but like you said, that is an investment. And at the moment we live hand to mouth, very simply. But as I have always said to my husband, I used to work in a very, very fancy school in London where there were the likes of Rio Ferdinand's kids there and other footballers and Jamie Oliver's kids and all the rest of it. And there was a time when one of the kids came up to me and I said, "Oh, your dad's in the office. He's waiting for you." And he went, "Really, really? Is that my dad?" And he went off to go and see him. And then he came back in and he said, this is an 8-year-old. And he said, "That's not my dad. It's my driver." And he was so upset and so gutted because he hadn't seen his father for God knows how long, because he was away making lots of money. And I just think there is, you know, the time that we have with our family, we might be poor, but we're rich in that sense. And that means an awful lot to me. I'd just like to make a little bit more money so we could, you know, afford the car insurance or whatever, you know, like not a fancy life, but just a simple, just have the cushion there in the bank. It would be really nice to have. So I don't know, a lot of food for thought, I think. I hope you're going to be there on the 8th, Beth. You going to be there?
No, I'm in London next week. I'm at the O2, but we can catch up by Zoom anytime you want, Miriam.
Okay, well, that would be really, really helpful.
We will.
Really helpful. Thank you.
And it's this definition of richness, isn't it, Miriam? You know, richness of that little boy wasn't having a driver, but would have been seeing his dad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So sometimes it's thinking, well, I'm rich in other things.
Yeah.
I'm rich in the time I dedicate to my children, or
Yeah.
the time I can spend with my family. And so I think sometimes we just need to define in our lives, what does rich really look like as well?
I totally agree. It's just difficult sometimes when the kids say, can we do such and such? And you're like, no, we can't. Or they overhear a conversation that's about house insurance, something boring that they don't understand. And we're like, but that's coming up, so we're going to have to cut back because we've got to pay for that. You know, it's just about trying to make life a little bit more comfortable. I think, like Beth said about, I don't need a lavish lifestyle at all, but it would just be nice not to be constantly worrying.
Thank you, Miriam, for sharing. Thank you. And coming to you, Carly, what have you learned this evening? What will you put into action, or have you got a tip to share?
I'm not sure I've got any tips, but I thought it was great. Thanks, Beth. Learned loads. There's I haven't got any debt, but I think there's things I could be doing better, definitely. And I've written a few things down on there, and I think probably I'll catch up with you at some point, Beth, to see where I can go with it all.
Thank you, Carly. And coming to you, Beth the clothes, Beth the dress.
Yes.
Beth the style.
I've made lots of little, notes, so lots of things that I need to think about, but I think it'll be helpful to me when I meet with Beth on the 15th or something
like that. Week after next.
Yeah, just because, like I say, I'm not very many motivated, but it's a necessary evil, I think, is what me and Miriam are saying, isn't it? It's like, it'd be nice not to be worried about money, and to, well, I have done stupid things as well, like lend things to people that have promised me to pay them back at certain points and haven't. So I've just, we've done a little remortgage to get some housework done, but it's only a little bit. And again, I think that's because the house has gone up anyway, and because it's so low at the mo. But then again, I need to speak to Beth to know, is it better to be repaying a bit more on the mortgage, or to be putting into pension, or to be thinking about some other way, or some other investment, or and but that's all started, it's a nice session to start thinking about some things.
Lovely. Thank you, Beth. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's okay. Thank you. And coming to Ellie. Ellie, what have you taken from this evening's session? What would you like to share?
Love the idea, Beth, about the premium bonds. My granny was a massive advocate for premium bonds. She also always used to make a lot of income from them. She was a massive winner. So I do have some premium bonds, which is quite interesting. I've invested in a couple of things recently. I'm very lucky because I do have a couple of pensions as well going. I think I need to be a little bit more shrewder and really think about exactly what I want to plan for. I did invest in a car which is worth quite a bit more than what I paid for it now, and it's a car that I always wanted, so I'm very grateful for the fact that I was able to do that. But selfishly, I bought it for a bit of fun as well as an investment, so I know that the investment in the car will continuously go up in the next 10-15 years, which is quite exciting. But I think in terms of planning for futures, I think the earlier, and I wish I was able to have done it earlier, but hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? So,
lovely. Thank you, Ellie. And coming to you, Kathy, what have you got from this evening? What are you going to put to work, or have you got some tips?
Well, I love the premium bond things as well. It seems such an old-fashioned, old-world idea, and I mean, since my divorce years ago, I am a great fan of Excel spreadsheets, and I've got Excel'd out to death. I know every month exactly what I owe. I know what's coming in, and then at the end of every month, I've also got a little calculator in there which shows me whether I'm up on last month or down on last month, and give myself a little kick up the arse if I haven't done what I thought I was going to do. So I really thought, brilliant, I'm on it. And also, like, when it comes to presenting the stuff to the accountants, it's very quick, because it's not a big, massive monster that's comes to the end of the year and I've got to find everything. I just do it. Like you said, Cheryl, at the beginning, I don't like doing this, same as you don't like doing that. But if you do it every month, it's done and you're on top of it. But having said that, so thinking I'm on top of it all, and thinking I was the expert in me, going to see Beth, my God, she opened my mind up to stuff that I couldn't possibly see outside my little box that I'm in. Because, you get used to your own little life and what you're doing. You think this, you've got it sussed. And she went in, she just tore one out of my pension, and she's done so many things. It's like, whoa, my whole future's looking very different now, which is, thank you, Beth. And let's have another coffee soon.
Lovely. Thank you, Kathy. And over to you, Yvonne. What have you learned, or what tip would you like to share?
Well, I just literally printed off a little form to trace all my premium bonds. I know my dad bought me loads and loads when I was a kid. I don't know where they are or what they are. So I've done a little form and I'm going to trace them all.
Oh, well done.
Oh,
yeah, you could have winnings just waiting there, Yvonne.
If I'm worth a minute, you won't see me again.
Or you'll be on a surfboard and out on sort of Bondi Beach.
I'll be exotic. I might just pop in, see you.
Lovely. Karen, over to you. What have you learned? What are you going to put into action, or tip to share?
I think for me, it's just remembering that, everything goes up and down when it comes to money. I mean, 15 years ago, we were deep in the hole because the house we bought, the prices collapsed. It was worth half what we paid for it, and we were in massive negative equity. Now we've almost got it paid off because we've just sat and just paid it a little bit extra each month. And as we've increased it over the years, that's actually paid dividends. And it's just keep at it, because whatever happens, there is this illusion with money. 15 years ago, the tramp in the street had more money than we did, because we owed so much and they owed nothing. And people forget that, you have this comparison with people who look rich but owe so much money. And yet the person in the street who owes nothing is actually richer than them. And that's how I just look at it,
I can remember in one of our books that an accountant wrote a chapter on 2 cars on the drive, but no food in the fridge. It's a bit like that. Yeah. So over to you, Steffi. What have you got for this evening, or what tip would you like to share? What are you going to put to work?
Well, money never meant anything to me all my life. It was literally, I was never into finding a rich man or whatever, like so many of my friends. But now, where I'm older and where I have different goals of where I want to retire or what we want to do, I work now smart and hard to be able to afford things when I'm older, hopefully, if I do it right. What I definitely learned from Beth tonight is that I have to look into my pension, because I know I've got one, but I have no idea where it is or what it does. Yeah, and I think my biggest learning in the last few years and from tonight is to teach my son to work very differently with money. He's only 13, and I don't want him to spend whatever he's got and just, blow it out of the window like I did. So I think learning from Beth probably over coffee on how to teach him what to do correctly with money would be great.
Fantastic. Beth, the last word from you.
Steffi, there's one thing I do with my son, because my son's the same age as yours, and he has a junior ISA, which he knows I put money into every month. And people worry about junior ISAs because when your kid turns 18, the money's theirs. They can do whatever they want with it. And people think, oh my God, do I want my 18-year-old suddenly having control of his funds? But I don't worry, because every month my son and I sit down and he looks at how his money has grown, or if the markets are down, how they've gone down, and we talk about it. He likes to pick and choose his stock. So I let him have a little play. I let him make a couple of decisions so he feels he's in control. But he understands that this money has built up over time because I put something in every month for him. He's seen how things go up and down. So he's actually quite an experienced investor at the age of 13. And when he's 18, he is not going to take that money and waste it, because he knows how hard we've worked together to grow that pot for him. And I think they are old enough by the time they're 13 to start to take an interest and learn those sorts of principles. And it can only put them in good stead when they're older, really. I've got people now with everything that's going on in the world, the markets are really, really volatile. And I've got people in their 60s, in their 70s, ringing me every day, panicking about their investments. I know my son understands the markets well enough that he would get the bigger picture on things. And I would say that to all of you as well. If you're panicking now, if you're seeing on the news all these stories about how the markets are being affected and the value is being wiped off pensions and all these stories, don't get wound up about it or get upset about it, because the newspapers like to sensationalize these things, and the markets have always gone up and down. So if you don't need to access this money in the short term, don't worry about it. The markets crashed in 2020 because of the pandemic. They came back really quickly. We're in a better position now than we were then. So if any of you are having sleepless nights, I know a lot of my clients are upset at the moment, panicking about their money. Just take that broader view, the longer term view, that these little things that happen actually are blips over the course of your whole life, and they won't make that big a difference to your overall position. So just don't panic too much about anything you see in the headlines about how everything going on in Russia is affecting your pensions or your investments. Don't panic about it. Really just big picture.
Lovely. Well, can we all put our hands together and thank Beth? She's been absolutely amazing. Thank you, Beth. Fantastic. So next week we won't be online because we've got a live event on Tuesday night in the beautiful Miskin Manor, and we've got 3 fantastic speakers. We've got Shelley Lane, who you know is the ambassador for Milkshake, an amazing saleswoman. In 52 weeks before the pandemic, she was in 52 different countries. She's really going to share with you how she moved from being local to international, and she's going to be bringing some of her work with her. And some of you might not know that I actually introduced the amazing Lorna and Lorraine to her, and at the moment this evening they're doing a major photo shoot, and that piece of work is going to go into an international competition, and that piece of work will be with us next Tuesday evening, and they'll be sharing with us how that networking collaboration has the potential of taking them both again out onto a global stage. So Shelley will have so much to share with you. It's very rare we can get somebody like a Shelley that started off super local, stayed super local, but works international. She's been featured on I don't know how many Cosmopolitan covers, Vogue covers, you name it. She's done the cover pieces for the makeup and the hair for models on front pages, and internationally, you know, she's been all over the world. She's one of the very few hairdressers I would call an artist that puts together pieces, almost like an exhibition pieces that then goes into an exhibition all of their own. So Beth, the clothes, you really need to meet this lady, because again, we can get you collaborating with her, because there's going to be bits and pieces of what she does. She works in hair and style. Again, there could be an opportunity to collaborate. The same with Steffi. Steffi is generously sponsored to do the photography. Again, there could be an opportunity there for Steffi to do some photography with her, because this lady is not a photographer. She is, you know, what I would call a hairstylist / artist that works in collaboration with lots of other people. So I think when we have the opportunity to get alongside such an exceptional talent, I think it's somebody we can all learn from, but also really get to know, because they can open the next door for us or introduce us to the next interesting person, or a gallery or a shop or a whatever. So as I said, you know, we're very lucky to have Shelley. Luckily, she lives locally, so she's willing to speak for us. But I really would encourage you, you've got to get along to meet this lady, because she is exceptional. And I've started to work with her to get her to, you know, introduce my members to her, to get her working with them and get them connected internationally as well. So it's going to be a fabulous evening. So that's in the Miskin Manor, 6 o'clock next Tuesday evening. And of course, it's International Women's Day, so we'll be having some fun. I've been given loads and loads of silent auction prizes by the housing charity, and we're going to have a silent auction there as well. So they've got us tickets for race courses, golf clubs, all that kind of stuff. So we'll have some fun as well. So thank you everyone for turning out this evening, and I hope you all now can go back into some space, have a gin and tonic and a pancake. So thank you everyone, and see you all on Tuesday evening. Night night everyone, stay safe, bye bye.